A police officer humiliated a black teen by cutting her hair, unaware she was the daughter of an FBI chief. What happened next turned his abuse of power into a moment of reckoning that shocked everyone. This story is about courage, justice, and standing up against wrongs. Stay tuned to see how one act of resilience changed everything, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more impactful stories. The community center in Atlanta, Georgia, was buzzing with activity, but today it felt even more packed than usual. Sophia Carter, a bright and passionate 15-year-old, sat in the corner of the preparation room, flipping through her notes for the upcoming debate on racial inequality in schools. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes burned with determination. "Elijah, she looks nervous," Sophia's mother whispered, glancing toward her daughter. "She'll be fine," replied Elijah Carter, Sophia's father and the director of the Civil Rights Division at the FBI in Atlanta. "Sophia doesn't back down. She gets that from me." Elijah walked over to his daughter and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Sophia, you've worked so hard for this. Remember, no one knows this issue better than you." "But Dad," Sophia murmured, her voice barely audible, "what if people don't like what I say?" "There will always be people who disagree," Elijah said firmly, crouching down to meet her gaze. "But if you don't speak up, who will? Remember, I've got your back, no matter what." Sophia took a deep breath and smiled faintly. "I'll do my best, Dad. I promise." With her father's words lingering in her mind, Sophia stood, ready to face whatever awaited her. The auditorium buzzed with energy as students, teachers, and even a handful of parents settled into their seats. Sophia stood behind the podium, gripping its edges as she steadied her breathing. Her nerves were evident, but the fire in her eyes betrayed her resolve. She glanced at her best friend, Mia, seated in the front row, who gave her a thumbs up. The principal gave a brief introduction before stepping aside. "Now, let's welcome Sophia Carter, who will present her perspective on an important issue: racial inequality in our schools." The microphone hummed softly as Sophia leaned forward. "Good morning," she began, her voice surprisingly steady. "Today I want to talk about identity, equity, and the systemic challenges that students like me face every day. These are not just stories, they are lived realities." As Sophia delved into her points, she noticed the subtle shifts in the audience. Some nodded in agreement, others sat stiffly, arms crossed. Officer Ray Matthews, stationed near the exit, seemed particularly displeased. His jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed as Sophia shared statistics on racial bias in schools and recounted her own experiences of being treated unfairly. Her words struck a nerve. "This isn't about creating division," Sophia declared passionately. "It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that every student feels safe and valued." The applause that followed was scattered but genuine. Sophia exhaled, relieved, and stepped off the stage. As she walked toward the hallway, Officer Matthews approached, his face stern. "You think you're so brave, don't you?" Matthews sneered. "Standing up there, spouting your little speech. Let me tell you something, young lady. Your words only stir up trouble." Sophia stopped, her heart pounding. "With all due respect, Officer Matthews," she replied, her voice trembling but firm. "Truth isn't trouble. If you see it that way, maybe you're part of the problem." Matthew's face darkened. "You need to learn some humility," he snapped, gripping her arm. "You think you can say whatever you want without consequences? Let me show you what happens to kids who step out of line." He dragged her into an empty hallway as stunned students followed, whispering and filming on their phones. From his pocket, Matthews pulled out a pair of scissors, glinting under the fluorescent lights. Sophia's voice shook as she protested. "You can't do this. It's not right." Matthews smirked. "Right? This is about respect." The sound of the scissors snapping shut echoed in the hallway as strands of Sophia's hair fell to the floor, one by one. The humiliation burned hotter than her tears as she sat frozen in the chair Officer Matthews had shoved her into. Around her, the hallway filled with shocked whispers and the faint hum of smartphones recording the scene. Some students looked away, unable to bear the sight, while others stared, wide-eyed and speechless. "Maybe now you'll think twice before running your mouth," Matthews said coldly, tossing another chunk of her hair to the ground. His voice carried the venom of someone who relished his power. "You needed a lesson in respect, and I'm here to teach it." Sophia tried to speak, but her voice cracked under the weight of fear and disbelief. "This isn't right. You're not allowed to do this," she managed to whisper. "Oh, I'm allowed," Matthews sneered, leaning closer. "You're lucky I didn't haul you out of here in handcuffs." Suddenly, the front doors of the school burst open, the sound reverberating through the tense hallway. Heavy, purposeful footsteps echoed closer, each step demanding attention. The students turned their heads, parting instinctively, as a tall man in a dark suit emerged. His badge glinted under the fluorescent lights, but his eyes, sharp and blazing, were fixed on one person, Officer Matthews. "What the hell is going on here?" Elijah Carter's voice rang out, cutting through the silence like a blade. The authority in his tone made Matthews flinch. "Mr. Carter," Matthews stammered, his confidence faltering for the first time. This is a school matter. You have no jurisdiction here." "Wrong," Elijah replied, his voice low and lethal as he stepped closer. "You've just made this a federal matter. Step away from her. Now." Matthews hesitated, the scissors trembling slightly in his hand. He glanced at the crowd of students, many still recording, before meeting Elijah's unwavering stare. Slowly, he let the scissors drop to the floor with a metallic clatter. Elijah moved to Sophia, his gaze softening as he crouched to her level. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his voice a stark contrast to the one he'd used moments earlier. Sophia nodded faintly, her body still trembling. Elijah stood, turning back to Matthews. "You're done," he said coldly. "Abuse of power, assault, and public humiliation of a minor. You're going to answer for every single one of your actions." Within minutes, federal agents stormed the hallway, cuffing Matthews as the crowd erupted into murmurs. Sophia's tears of humiliation slowly turned into ones of relief as her father stood firmly by her side, her protector in her darkest moment. The hallway buzzed with tension as Officer Matthews stood frozen, handcuffed by federal agents, his face pale and his jaw clenched. His authority, once wielded with cruelty, had vanished in the wake of Elijah Carter's arrival. Students lined the walls, phones still recording, capturing every moment of the dramatic fallout. The whispers among them grew louder, disbelief and satisfaction mingling in the air. "You can't do this," Matthews protested, his voice trembling. "I was just maintaining order." She was out of line. Elijah stepped forward, his gaze cutting through Matthews' excuses. "Maintaining order," he repeated, his voice steady but seething. "By assaulting a minor? By humiliating her in front of her peers? You call that order? I call it abuse of power." Matthews struggled to maintain his composure, glancing at the students who were now openly glaring at him. "You don't understand," he spat. She was creating division, disrespecting authority. Someone had to put her in her place. Elijah's eyes narrowed, his tone dropping to a lethal calm. You think this is about authority. You think you can strip someone of their dignity and walk away unscathed? He took a step closer, towering over Matthews. You picked the wrong person to mess with, not just because she's my daughter, but because she has the courage to stand up against bullies like you. Sophia, standing silently beside her father, felt her heart pound as she watched the scene unfold. Her hands were still shaking, but she clenched them into fists, summoning strength from her father's unwavering presence. The crowd of students shifted, their murmurs growing louder as the weight of Elijah's words settled over them. "Mr. Carter, this isn't necessary," Matthews tried again, his voice cracking as his confidence crumbled. "We can handle this internally." Elijah didn't waver. "You've already done enough damage. From this moment on, this is a federal investigation. Every choice you've made, every action you've taken, will be scrutinized." He turned to the agents. "Take him." As Matthews was led away, his protest drowned by the buzz of the hallway, Elijah turned to Sophia. His expression softened, but his voice carried the same conviction. "You're safe now." Sophia nodded, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Thank you, Dad." Elijah placed a hand on her shoulder and said firmly, "This isn't just about you, Sophia. It's about making sure no one else has to go through this again." The aftermath of the incident spread like wildfire. By the time Sophia and her father left the school that day, social media was ablaze with videos of Officer Matthews cutting her hair, the confrontation with Elijah Carter, and the eventual arrest. The hashtag #Justice for Sophia began trending within hours, sparking outrage and support from across the country. At home, Sophia sat on the couch, still processing everything. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with messages of solidarity and requests for interviews. Elijah entered the room, holding 2 mugs of tea, and handed one to her. "How are you holding up?" he asked, sitting beside her. Sophia stared into her cup, her voice low. "It doesn't feel real, Dad. I thought I'd feel relieved, but I don't. Not yet." Elijah placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "That's because the fight isn't over. Matthews is just the beginning. The system that allowed him to act like that needs to be held accountable too." The next morning, Elijah called a press conference outside the FBI field office. Cameras flashed as he addressed the media. "What happened to my daughter is a symptom of a larger issue: systemic racism and abuse of power. This investigation won't stop with Officer Matthews. We're examining every complaint, every ignored report, and every policy failure that allowed this to happen." Back at school, Sophia returned to a mix of reactions. Some teachers avoided her, their guilt evident. Others offered quiet words of support. Her classmates treated her like a hero, but Sophia felt a heavy weight. She knew this wasn't about her alone. In the weeks that followed, the community rallied behind Sophia. Protests demanded reform, and the school board faced mounting pressure to implement changes. For Sophia, the path ahead was daunting, but with her father and the community by her side, she felt ready to take it on. Weeks after the incident, the fallout continued to ripple through the community. Officer Matthews faced multiple charges, including assault and abuse of power. His badge was permanently stripped, and he awaited trial. The school administration wasn't spared either. Investigations revealed years of ignored complaints, disciplinary failures, and a toxic environment that enabled Matthews' behavior. Principal Hastings, under immense pressure, resigned, while several teachers who supported Matthews were placed on administrative leave. Sophia sat at the kitchen table with her father, going over the latest news coverage. Headlines read, "Justice for Sophia, a community demands change." She looked up at Elijah, her eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and determination. "Do you think this will actually make a difference, Dad?" she asked. Elijah set down his coffee and leaned forward. "It already has," he said firmly. "But change doesn't happen overnight. This is just the start, and it's going to take more than one victory to fix the system." The next day, Sophia attended a town hall meeting where community members discussed policy reforms. She was invited to speak, and despite her nerves, stood confidently at the microphone. "This isn't just about me," she began, her voice steady. "This is about every student who's ever felt silenced or unsafe. We can't let this happen again. Not here, not anywhere." Her words resonated with the audience, sparking applause and renewed calls for action. Later that evening, as they walked home, Sophia turned to Elijah. "You know, for the first time I feel like things might actually change." Elijah smiled, placing an arm around her shoulders. "That's because they will. And you helped make it happen." Though the road ahead was long, Sophia felt a new sense of purpose. Together with her father and her community, she was ready to keep fighting for a better future. Sophia's story is a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up against injustice, even when it feels overwhelming. From her courage, we learn that silence in the face of wrongdoing enables oppression, while action, no matter how small, can spark significant change. In our daily lives, it's vital to recognize that accountability isn't just the responsibility of those in power. It's something we all must uphold. The first takeaway is to speak up when you witness unfair treatment. Whether it's at school, work, or in the community, your voice can bring attention to issues others might ignore. Second, be an ally. Like Elijah's unwavering support for Sophia, stand with those who are marginalized. Show up, listen, and amplify their voices. This story also emphasizes the importance of systemic reform. Real change goes beyond addressing individual incidents. It requires dismantling the structures that allow discrimination to persist. Advocate for policies that promote equity and transparency in your schools, workplaces, and institutions. Finally, resilience is key. Sophia's journey shows us that even when the fight feels long, progress is possible. Each of us has the power to make a difference. One voice, one action, one stand at a time. Together, we can create a world where everyone feels safe, respected, and valued. Today's story is not just about Sophia's courage, but also about the responsibility we all have when faced with injustice. If you witnessed something wrong like this, what would you do? Would you choose to speak up and fight for what's right, one, or stay silent out of fear and wait for someone else to act, two? Leave a comment with either one or two below to share your choice. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel and stay updated with more impactful stories.